India in the late 13th century was predominantly under the thumb of Muslim sultans in the north, in the city of Delhi. Upstart rival kingdoms were starting to break free in the southern region, the Deccan. Meanwhile, Mongol armies were amassing to the northeast, also threatening the Sultan's rule. This is the Deccan empires of medieval India. This is Vijayanagara from GMT Games, and you're watching What Does That Piece Do? Vijayanagara is the first game in the Irregular Conflict series by GMT Games. This is based on the foundation laid by Coin, the counterinsurgency series, specifically Gandhi, the pieces of which served as the inspiration for the design of Vijayanagara. ICS games are meant to be simpler to understand and quicker to play than Coin, making Vijayanagara a great gateway game to get into more heavy and complex history games. This video is meant for anyone who wants to learn how to play Vijayanagara, so even if you're familiar with the Coin system, it's worth watching to understand all the differences. Before we proceed, please like and subscribe this channel so you don't miss any future videos. And check out my Vijayanagara unboxing video if you want to learn more about how this game came to be. But for now, let's get started. Vijayanagara is a battle between three factions. When the game begins, provinces across the subcontinent are all in a tributary relationship with the Delhi Sultanate, sending regular payments of gold and cavalry to the Sultan for fear of retribution. The Delhi Sultanate wins if it can keep most of these provinces under its thumb throughout the game. But the other two factions, Bahmani Kingdom and the Vijayanagara Empire, will try to found their own independent kingdoms to pave their path to victory, while building either forts or temples for extra points and increasing their influence across the Deccan. The Sultanate must also contend with the constant threat of attack by the Mongol army from the mountains in the northwest. The Bahmani and Vijayanagara players will have opportunities to control the actions of the Mongol army throughout the game, and the Delhi Sultanate has an additional opportunity to win or lose points depending on how they fare against Timur's invasion at the end of the game. Each faction has a unique set of actions they can perform, or they may choose to activate an event from the event cards in the deck that control the flow of the game. Players don't take these cards into their hand, there's always one exposed at a time, and they drive the game. Throughout the deck, there are 3 succession cards, which will cause a pause in the game as some unique actions can be taken by each faction. And towards the bottom of the deck, there will be 2 Timurid Empire cards, which hasten the end of the game. Players that are used to the Coin system may think of the succession cards as slimmed down propaganda cards, like in Cuba Libre, or coup cards like in Fire in the Lake, or campaign cards like in Gandhi. But in Vijayanagara, there is no victory check that would determine a winner with these succession cards. Play will continue until the final Timurid Empire card, so the game will always go to the full distance and use up almost the entire deck. The faction's overall points and available resources, which they spend to carry out commands, are tracked along the top of the board. The goal of each faction is simply to have the most points at the end of the game, with ties broken by the most resources, but the way each faction scores points is slightly different. The Delhi Sultanate scores points from the total prosperity of its tributary provinces. The Sultanate begins the game with the maximum number of tributary provinces, 18 points for total associated prosperity. The Bahmani Kingdom scores points for the prosperity of their independent provinces on the map, as well as number of forts on the map, and the influence level on the Deccan influence track. Similarly, the Vijayanagara Empire scores points for the total prosperity of their independent provinces, plus the number of temples that they have on the map, plus their Deccan influence. At the beginning of the game, the Bahmani Kingdom and the Vijayanagara Empire have really yet to form, and both start with 0 points. Each faction has a certain number and type of pieces that are placed and moved around on the map that will help them achieve their victory points and thwart the other players from obtaining theirs. The Delhi Sultanate has cubes, which represent troops, hex cylinders, which are their powerful governors, and the discs are their structures called the Kasbahs. Kasbahs are used to conscript troops more efficiently and to support the attacks in neighboring provinces. The Bahmanis have hex cylinders, which are local rulers called emirs, and discs representing their defensive forts, which protect them from attack and allow them to support attacks in neighboring provinces. Vijayanagara has hexes as well, minor rulers called rajas, and their discs are temples. Temples offer rallying and taxing benefits and allow Vijayanagara to support attacks in neighboring provinces. Emirs and rajas have two states when on the map, which depend on their relationship to the Sultan in Delhi. When the top hex is blank, they are called obedient. When flipped so that symbol is revealed, they are called rebelling. Emirs and rajas start the game obedient, but flip to rebelling if they attack the Sultan or if they cast off a tributary marker using the rebel command. More on that later. Governor symbols, they also have a crescent moon symbol on one side, but that side is always up. They don't change states. They're always just governors for the Sultan. Same with the structures. They are always symbol side up. The non-player faction, the Mongols, are represented by cubes and will only ever enter certain portions of the map. All of these wooden bits are pieces. The ones representing people, including troops, governors, emirs, rajas, and Mongols, are all units, which can move across the board and participate in other actions, such as migrate and conspire. Any further differentiation in the units is referred to by their actual unit name in the rules and on the event cards. All pieces are meant to be placed on the board, either on the map or in the respective players' available boxes. Mongols all start in the Mongol invaders box. There are also some emirs and rajas on the Deccan influence track, potential new allies which only become available when the track reaches that level for the respective faction. The map of India consists of provinces separated by borders, some of which intersect at named cities which appear on the event cards. One large city space representing the Sultan's capital in Delhi, and two other provinces northwest of Delhi, which are Mongol invasion regions. These smaller cities such as Chittor, Devagiri, Warangal, they are points of reference, which may be called out on certain event cards, such as any province adjacent to Warangal, meaning Gondwana, Madhya Andhra, or Orissa. Provinces are adjacent to each other if they share a border, including passing through a shared city at a vertex. For instance, Madhya and Orissa are adjacent to each other through Warangal. There's one more special area, the Vindhya range, which cannot be entered by any pieces. It merely acts as a historically important hindrance to movement. Malwa and Gondwana are not adjacent. Neither are Madhya or Jaunpur. These provinces, not including Punjab or mountain passes, all have a prosperity value. As tributaries, their prosperity value counts towards the Sultanate's ultimate victory points. If and when the tributary is removed, it becomes an independent province, which is controlled by whichever faction has a majority of pieces there. If that is the Bahmanis or the Vijayanagara, then that prosperity goes towards their victory points. There's no stacking limit in any spaces as far as units, but there can only ever be one of any type of structure in a space. That could include all three distinct types: a kasbah, a fort, and a temple. But there can never be two or more kasbahs, forts, or temples in any one province. A faction has the majority in a province if it has more pieces there than the other two factions combined. A space is only controlled by that faction in the majority area as long as that space isn't a tributary. So say Gujarat is a tributary province, but is empty of any pieces. If the Bahmani gets an emir in there, they'd have the majority, but not control until that tributary is removed, usually through the faction's rebel command. If that happened, the tributary marker is removed and it becomes an independent province, and Delhi Sultanate's victory points go down by 2, Bahmani kingdoms up by 2. If the Sultanate later gets 2 more pieces in there, let's say a troop and a governor, That would be under Sultanate control. Bahmani's points go back down by 2, but the Sultanates would not go up by 2. Remember, they need to make it a tributary again, so that prosperity counts towards their victory points. But right now, it's still independent province, not a tributary. The Sultanate needs to take a separate action to get that tributary back in place. But say in the meantime, Vijayanagara was able to swoop in with 3 Rajas to nullify control. Just take that control marker away. That space is an uncontrolled independent province. Later, if Vijayanagara was able to place a temple here, they would control the independent province, since they have a majority of pieces. This includes units and structures. Vijayanagara would get those 2 points on their victory track. Each faction will need to spend resources to conduct most of their action, and their available resources are marked along the track. Each basic command costs 1 resource per space where the command is performed, and each faction has a special decree which they can sometimes use to recoup those resources throughout the game. If they get desperate, a player can pass for 1 resource if they're Bahmani or Vijayanagara, 3 resources as the Sultan. Event cards can also reward the factions with more resources. Some of the Bahmani and Vijayanagara victory points may come from the Deccan influence track. At the beginning of the game, there are 2 emirs each on the 2 and 4 space for the Bahmani, and 2 Rajas on each space for the Vijayanagara faction. Certain actions and events may increase or decrease the standing on these tracks. As the tracks increase, when the marker enters a space with pieces, the faction gains those pieces immediately and places them onto their available box on the board. Likewise, if the tracks were to decrease from a space with the outline of the pieces, the player needs to place 2 of those pieces back on the space. They can come from the available, but if there aren't enough pieces in available, they need to be removed from any space on the board, multiple spaces if necessary. The level of the track not only determines extra victory points, but also some special benefits which you'll see as we go through the Bahmani Kingdoms and Vijayanagara Empire's available actions. On any given turn where a faction is eligible, they will very likely be taking a basic command action, sometimes in multiple spaces, and sometimes pairing them with a special decree. Each faction has 4 commands and 3 decrees to choose from, and will only execute 1 of either, but again, that same command, possibly a decree, in multiple spaces if that's an option. I'll go through these commands and decrees fairly quickly to give you a sense of what can be done without getting too detailed, because these players' aids should always be at your fingertips. Players can use these pawns, which help keep track of where the faction is executing the actions. You can use the white pawns for the commands and the burgundy pawns for decrees. Let's start by looking at the Sultanate's commands, starting with conscript. This is how the Sultanate gets more of their troops on the board. In any province that is a tributary or has a Kasbah, or in Delhi, they can pay 1 resource per space to place troops. That's 1 troop if it's just a tributary, 2 if there's a Kasbah in that province, or 5 troops if it's Delhi. In order to move those troops and governors around the map, the Sultanate will use the march command. Paying 1 resource per destination space, they can move any number of units into that space from any adjacent spaces. That includes troops and governors. Govern is the act of placing governor pieces on the board or leveraging some of the governor's special capabilities. Paying 1 resource per space, the Sultanate may place a governor piece at any tributary or a Sultan-controlled independent province. Or, if there's a governor already there, they may place a Kasbah and also may remove 2 obedient pieces in that space. Attack is how the Sultanate can remove rebelling emirs or rajas, those with their symbol facing up, or Mongol invaders in Delhi, Punjab, or Mountain Passes region. In each space, they can pay 1 resource and declare 1 faction to attack. Up to 2 units from an adjacent space with a Kasbah may also join this fight, but they stay in their original space, perhaps near the border so that we remember that they were in the attack. I'll go into more detail on how attack works shortly. Both the Bahmani Kingdom and Vijayanagara Empire have similar actions with the same names, with some minor nuances. So let's go through them at the same time. Even though their actions are similar though, their strategies and strengths are pretty different, which we'll talk about later. First off is Rally, which is how Bahmanis get Amirs on the board and Vijayanagara gets Rajas on the board. By paying 1 resource per space where they already have a piece, the factions can add an Amir or a Raja in that space. The Bahmanis can also add an extra Amir in their home turf, Maharashtra, and an extra one in the independent space that they control. Vijayanagara can add an extra in their homeland, Karnataka, and an extra in a space they control, and in a space with a temple. If they control an independent Karnataka with a temple, they can place 4 Rajas there at only 1 resource cost. If they are placed in one of their independent controlled provinces, they will be placed rebelling as the other Amirs or Rajas in that space already. With units on the board, the Bahmani and Vijayanagara factions can start moving them around the board. Paying 1 resource per destination, Amirs and Rajas can be moved into any 1 destination per turn. Unlike the Sultan's March, only up to 3 Amirs or Rajas can migrate into the selected space. Each unit can only move once during a faction's turn. The same is true of an attack. As they enter a space, make note of their obedient or rebelling status. If migrating into a tributary province, they stay or flip to obedient, starting life anew. If they migrate into an independent province that they control, they flip to rebelling. Any Amirs and Bahmani-controlled independent provinces are always rebelling, and any Rajas in Vijayanagara-controlled independent provinces are always rebelling as well. Their controlled province, their rules. Otherwise, there's no change to their obedient or rebelling status. When either Bahmani or Vijayanagara migrate into a province with at least one of the opposing faction's piece, not the Delhi Sultanates, then they may pay 1 more resource to shift their influence on the track up 1 space and bring the others down 1 space. Be sure to adjust the victory track accordingly, add or remove pieces as needed, and note the ongoing effects for future actions. This adjustment of influence can only be done once per turn. Rebel. This is how Bahmani and Vijayanagara can remove tributary markers and shift victory away from the Delhi Sultanate to themselves, paying 1 resource per space. In any space where that faction has a majority of pieces, they may rebel, removing the tributary marker, making the province independent. That faction now controls the independent province, so its units all become rebelling immediately. That province prosperity is reduced from the Delhi Sultanate's score on the victory track and added to the faction that just rebelled. And finally, the attack command is very similar to the Delhi Sultanate's attack for both the Bahmani and the Vijayanagara. But note that if either the Bahmanis or Vijayanagara attack the Delhi Sultanate, their pieces immediately flip to rebelling if they weren't already. The Sultan will not forget about these particular rulers. The Bahmanis, when attacking, can have up to 2 Amirs join the battle from an adjacent province that has a fort to add to their attacking numbers. Vijayanagara can have 1 Raja join from an adjacent province that contains a temple. Those pieces stay in those provinces, they just add to the numbers. So in theory, either could attack into a space where they don't even have a piece, just using pieces from their forts or temples, which can sometimes be useful. I will discuss the combat rules shortly, as it works the same for all factions, including the Mongol invaders. In a battle between the Bahmanis and Vijayanagara, if there's a victor, that's the side that took the fewest losses. Adjust the influence track +1 for the victor, -1 for the defeated faction. So those are all the commands for every faction, but sometimes the players will get to pair those with decrees. The Delhi Sultanate has the following. Collect tribute is a way to gather more resources for future turns. Take the value of the Sultanate's overall prosperity from tributaries, that is, their victory point level, divide in half and round down to add that many resources, and also take 2 cavalry tokens into the Sultanate's possession. Campaign is how the Sultanate can move their units, both troops and governors, over great distances. In a string of up to 4 adjacent spaces, the Sultanate may move any amount of units from the starting point to the end point of those spaces. dropping off and picking up units along the way. Note that the direction is important. This isn't merely arranging all their units across these 4 spaces. The units will only be leaving from the starting point and entering the other spaces along the way. But doing so can move units all the way from Delhi down to Karnataka in one fell swoop, as they're all adjacent within 4 of each other, but not from Delhi down to Tamilakam. Demand tribute is how the Sultanate puts tributary markers back down on the map, though first it will need to control an independent space, and a powerful governor will need to be present. In any provinces that are Sultanate controlled and contain a governor, the Sultanate may convert these spaces back into tributaries and collect resources equal to those provinces' prosperity. Be sure to adjust the victory points track and the resources. Rebelling units there are placed back to obedient, a firm message from the Sultan. The Bahmani Kingdom and Vijayanagara have their own useful decrees. Trade allows the Bahmanis to gain resources equal to the number of spaces in which they have a piece, even just a single piece, even just a fort. That's the number of spaces, not their total prosperity. They can also collect at least 1 cavalry token, or 2 tokens if their influence is 1 or 2, or 3 tokens if their influence is 3 to 4 on the influence track, as noted on the track. Tax is how Vijayanagara gets their resources. But it's a little different from how trade works. With tax, Vijayanagara gets resources equal to their total controlled prosperity plus the number of temples. So unlike the Bahmanis, they will really need to rebel before they can collect taxes for themselves. Build is pretty much the same for both factions. Either build a fort for Bahmani in a space where they have at least 1 piece, or for Vijayanagara, let's build a temple. Remember, there can never be more than 1 of the same structure in any one space. And remember to adjust the victory track accordingly. Conspire will allow Bahmani to replace a governor in 1 or 2 spaces that also has one of their pieces with an emir. If the influence track is 2 or higher, they can even reach into provinces adjacent to a Bahmani piece to have these whispered conversations, and can replace Rajas at that point too. Compel for Vijayanagara allows that faction to extend their reach rapidly across the map to bring new allies into the fold. Compel places 2 Rajas into a province adjacent to one of their pieces. With the influence track at 2 or higher, they may also remove 1 opposing unit in the new province and gain a cavalry token. If a Sultanate unit is removed in this way, all Vijayanagara pieces in that region flip to rebelling. That's all the commands and decrees laid out nicely in these player aids that each player will have to reference all throughout the game. So let's get this game set up. Follow the instructions closely in the rulebook. There's a diagram on the last page so that you can confirm that you've got everything set up the way it should be. All regions begin with tributary markers. And the influence track is set to 0 for the Bahmani and Vijayanagara factions. Thus only the Delhi Sultanate will have any score on the board, 18 victory points total. Place 4 of the emirs and 8 of the rajas on their spots on the influence track. All the remaining pieces for the factions will be in their available boxes, but do count them closely as there should be 1 additional of each unique piece that shift with the game as extras. Place the 12 Mongol cubes in the Mongol invaders box along with their special cavalry token, and give 2 cavalry tokens to the Delhi Sultanate. The remaining 8 cavalry tokens go into a pool by the board. There are only 10 cavalry tokens in total in the game. Make sure not to include the 2 extras that are shipped as replacements with the game. Place 1 of the large faction cylinders for each side on the resources track. Delhi Sultanate at 12, Bahmani Kingdom at 6, Vijayanagara at 7. The other large cylinder goes in the sequence of play section, all 3 in the eligible box, as that's how they'll start the game. Give each player a player aid and 1 of these attack reference cards that detail the nuances of the attack command. On the back is a handy symbol guide that you may want to reference for your first time of play. And there's also a handy 1-pager guide for each faction, which will be great for new players. They can read up on their faction and will also have some insights as to what will happen throughout the game with the succession cards. The back of the sheet is the non-player guide for that faction, and it won't be needed if you're going to have 3 human players in this game. Place the single unique dynasty card on the table for all to see on the Kalji Dynasty side. This serves as a reminder that the Rebel command is not available for either the Bahmani Kingdom or Vijayanagara Empire until the first succession card is revealed in the event stack. So now let's build that event stack. Next, take all the event cards. That's the most plentiful card here in the game. They have the symbols across the top for all the different factions. Take them, shuffle them well to randomize them, and you're going to make 4 equal piles of 6 cards. Next, take the Mongol invasion cards. There are a total of 8 in the game, 4 with each symbol of the Bahmani Kingdom and Vijayanagara Empire. You're only going to use 6 of them, so again, shuffle them up well and place 2 in the first 3 piles. In the 4th pile, you'll take the Timurid Empire cards and put them with those other 6 cards, shuffling them all well. Then, in between each stack, place the succession cards in this order. Between the first 2 stacks, the Zenith of the Delhi Sultanate, the second 2 stacks, the Rise of the Rebel Sultans, and the next stacks, Lords of the Deccan. Then stack them all together in this order. Take the first stack, the one with 6 random event cards and 2 Mongol invasion cards, on top of the Zenith of the Delhi Sultanate. Then take those, put them on top of the second stack, which again should have 2 Mongol cards. Then those on top of Rise of the Rebel Sultans, on top of the third stack, which has 2 Mongol invasion cards. And then finally, take that big stack, put on top of Lords of the Deccan, and then on the 4th stack, that 4th stack which has the Timurid Empire cards in them. This now forms the deck that drives the game. Take the remaining event cards and set them aside. They most likely won't be used in this game except for one rare event which may allow a player to look at those leftovers. Cards from this event deck will now be flipped over and revealed one at a time, and they will dictate which faction gets to act in which order. Looking at the sequence of play box, this, along with the event cards, dictates the flow of the game. Unlike in many coin games, all eligible factions will act on each event card. As all factions begin as eligible, the first player of the game is a faction noted in the leftmost space, showing the sequence of faction symbols at the top of the event card. The first player then has these options. Command and Decree. This player will get to execute as many of the same command in different spaces as allowed by the command's requirements and that they can afford. They'll also get to pair that command with one of the decrees as stipulated by the max spaces on the player aid. The command or decree may be performed to completion in either order. So you can start by doing a command in one space, then execute the decree, and then finish off with your commands. But you must execute them to the full extent before moving on to the next. The other option is event or command, which means that the player may choose to trigger the event on the event card or perform a command in multiple locations, but we will not be able to pair that with a decree. Or they may choose to do a limited command, which is a command in only one location, but they will get to stay eligible to act on the next card. The final option is to pass and stay eligible. Then they'll collect 1 resource if they're the Vijayanagara or Bahmanis, 3 resources if it's the Delhi Sultanate. Might seem like the first eligible faction would never take only limited command, but a limited command allows them to stay eligible for the next card too, potentially setting up some nice combinations. The second eligible faction now chooses what they will do, and then possibly a third eligible faction. Only one faction can take the full command and decree or the event, so if the first action took one of these options, it is now blocked. The next faction can only choose the other circle that wasn't taken, limited command, or they may pass. The third faction will also get the same options. If either the circles is available, they may take one. Otherwise, they're left with limited command or passing, stay eligible, and collecting resources. So only one faction can take the full command and decree or the event. So if the first action took one of these options, that is now blocked. But any number of factions can take a limited command and remain eligible, just like any of the factions could also pass. These are the only spaces that are unlimited. The circles themselves can only be taken by one faction. Players will want to pay close attention to the event text when making the decisions. as that event may be beneficial to the other players or detrimental to the acting player. In either case, if the player chooses one of those boxes to the right, they're ineligible to act on the next card, unless the event stipulates stay eligible. 66% of them do. Once all eligible factions taken their turn, then you adjust eligibility. Any of the faction markers in the two circles get moved to ineligible, meaning they will not be able to act on the next card, unless, of course, that event said to stay eligible. Shift any of the stay eligible factions to the eligible factions box, and proceed with the next card. So let's take a look at this example here. This card says the Vijayanagara Empire may act first, followed by Bahmani, and then Delhi Sultanate if they were all eligible. In this case, it's a very strong event for the Vijayanagara Empire, so they're going to take that. Next, Bahmani may act, and they may want to wait things out a little bit, see if one of the next cards comes up is quite good. So they'll just do a simple rally action in just one of their locations, paying only one resource. The Sultan may now also do the same, or they can do a full command decree. Sultanate decides to do a full command decree to get more of their pieces on the board and collect some more resources. As the event does not say stay eligible, both of these factions are now ineligible on the next card. The only eligible faction for the next card would be Bahmani. We flip and reveal the next card, and look at that. It is a very good, strong event for the Bahmani. As you can tell, they're the first one to act. They'll be able to take the event and stay eligible, or do the full command decree. But with them staying eligible, on the next turn, that would mean the other two factions also eligible. Everyone would be eligible again for the card after. Before we go much further, let's talk briefly about how combat works in the game, since it's almost always the same for any situation. The attacker normally gets to roll 4 dice, which in Vijayanagara is these red dice. The defender will then roll 2 dice, beige ones. Each die rolled for either side that is equal to or less than the number of attacking or defending units causes a hit to the other side, though an unmodified 6 is always a miss, no matter how many attacking units. But before these values are checked, the attacker, then the defender, have a chance to use cavalry tokens to adjust their rolls. So let's look at this example. In Gujarat, a battle is about to go down. Bahmanis want to attack the Sultanate. So that's going to be 4 Bahmanis versus 3 Sultanate pieces. But in this case, Bahmani wants to increase their odds, so they will include 2 from the neighboring province that has a fort. Now, as they're attacking, all of these emirs now are rebelling. Now, even though the Sultanate has a Kasbah nearby, they're the defenders, so they're not going to allow that troop to be able to come in and increase their odds as well. So now we roll the dice. Bahmani attacking, roll 4. They get 2 6s, a 2, and a 1. The Delhi Sultanate needs 3s to hit. They roll a 5 and a 1. So as it is right now, it looks like there's going to be 2 hits for the Bahmani. These 6s won't count, even though there's 6 in the attack. They're always going to be a miss. Sultanate only gets 1 hit from the 1. The 5 is not less than 3. But now this is where the horses come in. In this scenario, Bahmani just has 1 cavalry token. They can use this to either charge, reduce the roll of one of their dies. Reducing the 6 down to a 5 will cause another hit. Or they can use it to screen that 1 hit that's coming from the Sultanate right now. Meanwhile, the Sultanate still has 2 cavalry tokens that they can use. So in this case, Bahmani, they decide to charge the 6 down to a 5. 3 hits for them. Delhi Sultanate decides to charge that 5 twice. They can both be piled up on the same die. That 5 comes down to a 3. So now that's 2 hits for the Delhi Sultanate, 3 for the Bahmani. Remove the pieces as decided by the losing faction. Delhi Sultanate's going to take all 3 of theirs, obviously. Bahmani decides to take 2, both from the neighboring region that joined the attack, because they want to keep their numbers high. Use cavalry tokens, go back into the supply. That's it. The combat rules are pretty straightforward, but there are 2 very important exceptions to the rules. If the Bahmani kingdom is a target and there's a fort in that province, then the dice rolled for the attacker are only 3. Similarly, when the Mongols attack in Delhi, including during the Timurid invasion at the end of the game, they also roll only 3 dice instead of 4. And speaking of Mongols, well, would you look at that? It's Mongol invasion time. The next card in the deck dictates that the Vijayanagara player gets to decide what the Mongols are going to do on this turn. By the way, that faction will get to decide what the Mongols are doing even if they're not eligible for that turn. This is a special turn. By the way, the Mongol actions, they're on the back of the player aids, the final sheet. You can see the 3 different commands that the Mongols can take, as dictated by that player. They'll get to take 2 commands on this one Mongol card. The first command is Amass. Amass means taking 3 Mongol cubes from either available into mountain passes, or from mountain passes into Punjab, or from Punjab into Delhi. They have to be in the first location before they can move to the next location closer to Delhi. Any amount of Mongols that invade that exceeds 4 will spill over to the next region. So say if you did 2 amasses on one turn on one Mongol card, that'd be 3, then another 3, that would spill over 2 more into Punjab. The next command is Advance, which is just moving any number of invaders, but at least 1, into the next region. So again, that's from mountain passes into Punjab, or from Punjab into Delhi. The final command is an Attack and Plunder. Just like any other attack, we'll roll 4 dice for the attacking Mongols, and 2 for the Sultanate, as they're the defenders. And by the way, the Mongols always have 1 cavalry that they can charge with and bring one of the dies down, if applicable. That's always in their possession, it doesn't go into the supply. But in this case, it's not needed. They've got 2 hits against 2 Delhi Sultanates. Delhi Sultanate only had 2 pieces, so it's only 1 hit. Now after the hits are applied, however remaining Mongol invaders there are in that space will cause some further effects to the Delhi Sultanate. In mountain passes, for every invader left, that's 1 less resource. If the attack happened in Punjab, then any Mongols left after that, -1 resource for the Delhi Sultanate, and they must remove a troop from any province. It can be from multiple provinces if needed. And finally, if that attack happens in Delhi, first off, the Mongols are only going to roll 3 dice instead of 4. Apply the hits, and any left will require the loss of 1 resource for the Delhi Sultanate, and 2 troops per Mongol cube must be removed from provinces throughout the board. Once those hits are applied though, any remaining Mongol invaders in excess of 3 are moved back to available. As you'll also see on the Mongol invasion card, the Compromising Gifts allows the acting player to remove 1 of their influence for an extra 2 resources in 2 cavalry tokens. They can only do this once per turn, and it's totally optional. If they don't have any points on that influence track, they can't take that Compromising Gift action. Continue to draw cards in this way with players executing commands, decrees, and events in the order depicted on the cards until the next succession card comes up. When revealed, follow the instructions closely on the card after the event card before it has already been executed on. First instructions on the Zenith of Delhi Sultanate card is the instruction to flip over the Dynasty card we laid out at the beginning of the game. This means the Bahmani and Vijayanagara factions can start rebelling as commands on any upcoming turn. Reading through that card, the Delhi Sultanate can execute 1 campaign, just not using the Mongol provinces. Bahmani may gain some cavalry tokens, and Vijayanagara may gain some resources depending upon the board state and influence track. Remember, these succession cards are all laid out in the Faction Guide 1-pager, so those factions should get themselves in a position to take advantage of this succession. Once that card is executed, play goes with the current eligibility, drawing the next 8 cards, 2 of which will be Mongol invasions, until the next succession. Play continues on this way until we get to the last 8 cards of the deck. Then, as you'll recall, in these last 8 cards, rather than Mongol cards, we have the Timurid Empire cards. When the first Timurid Empire card is drawn, take half of the remaining Mongol invader cubes from the invader's box, rounded down, move them into mountain passes, and then move on. No further action. Once that second and final Timurid card is drawn, we're now on the final stage of the game. Conduct a Mongol attack first in mountain passes, rolling 4 for the Mongols, 2 for the Sultanate, using cavalry as needed. Apply the losses of cubes, but don't apply plunder. Take all the remaining cubes from both sides, move them into Punjab. Conduct another Mongol attack, no plunder. Finally, move any remaining cubes into Delhi, and it's a fight to the last side standing. Conduct Mongol attacks using 3 dice for the Mongols until one side is completely wiped out. Based on the number of remaining Mongol invader cubes in Delhi, adjust the Delhi Sultanate's victory by plus or minus 3, increasing by as much as 3 points if there's no Mongol invaders left, or by 2 points if there's just 1 Mongol invader left, 1 point if there's 2, 0 points if there's 3, all the way down to -3 if there's 6 Mongol invaders left. Now the dust settles. See who has the highest score on the victory track. Whoever's highest is the winner of the game. If there's a tie, the winner is the faction with the most resources left. If there's still a tie, the winners must face off in a bloody battle of Adu Huli Ata, the goat tiger game, which was popular in India around the time the narrative of this game takes place. A copy of the board for this game also comes with a copy of Vijayanagara as sold by GMT Games in 2024. But we'll have to save that tutorial for another video. Thanks for watching this video. I hope it helped you get started with Vijayanagara and on your way to explore more games like those in the Coin series and future titles in the Irregular Conflict series. Did this video help you learn the game? Do you need more help perhaps learning the solo non-player rules? Or do you want to hear more about the history of this time period in India? Drop a comment below and let me know. Until then, enjoy playing, and I hope to see you at the table someday.